you, but
There we go.
all right.
I just had to add you to the stream, so here we are. Let's see if we have anybody else in it. So you may want to add the or mute add the YouTube by clicking the upper right hand corner, and then mute YouTube if you want. You don't even have to have YouTube open if you don't want to.
So this is fine, just like this?
Mm-hmm. And we're live, by
Oh,
the way. We're on.
oh, okay, fantastic. Yeah, this was a little tricky. I
Yeah, I know, and it's
was
also
like
Mercury
totally
retrograde.
lost. Jesus. And then like
We're live, by the way, Philip. So this is going
yeah,
out in
yeah, yeah.
perpetuity for YouTube, just so you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I just want people to know why I'm a bit discombobulated.
Oh,
How
no
are how
worries.
all right. Okay. How is everything with you? This is our
Everything is
first
good. Live stream,
this is
yeah,
our
and
first live stream, by the way.
yeah, and we're just waiting. We got, I guess, two viewers right now, so we're just gonna wait. Viewers, please comment in the live chat. That's the whole point of this. So, yeah, look forward to it.
Wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
A new era has dawned.
yeah,
Our first,
yeah.
this is my first live stream ever. So,
Me too. So hopefully the
uh,
viewers will be merciful. So we're just gonna wait. I want to get at least 10 people before we get started, and so you're gonna talk today about the Holy Roman Empire. Is that right, Philip? We got three now, so we're just gonna wait till 10 viewers. We just want to get 10 viewers at least in here, and then we'll start from there. Please do comment. You can do super chats or super stickers or just regular comments. We're going to be answering questions. Uh, in the second half, we're going to start with Philip is going to do a presentation on the Holy Roman Empire, a fairly brief one, and we'll do a more in-depth dive later. And then I'm going to do a little bit of discussion about the Sola-Busca Tarochi, which is a 15th century Italian tarot deck that has encoded in it magical rites and also Moloch worship or Kronos worship. So quite interesting stuff. So we're just waiting for a few more people to come on, and then we're going to really launch into it. Please write your comments there in the chat. Viewers, love to see anything you have to say. Announce yourself. If you write a comment, we'll be giving you a shout out. So go ahead and start doing that. We're just going to wait a few more minutes here to get started, probably another 5 or 10. Oh, okay. We got P. Scott is saying good evening from Ireland. Wow, good evening to
ah,
you, Mr. Scott,
good
from
evening. Good
beautiful
evening.
Ireland. I was
I know
just
that's
looking
my big.
about. Oh, go ahead.
You know what's interesting? The last two, I live in Mongolia, and this is kind of a vestige of the socialist era. In socialist countries, you could go out to the street if you need to get a ride, and you just wave your hand, and anyone can pull over, and anyone can be a cab, and it's sort of how it functions. And you pay them basically the same amount as a cab. And the last
Mm,
two, when I really needed a ride, I go out, I wave down. The last two cab drivers or just ordinary people giving me a ride, they had been to Ireland. And so Ireland is a very popular destination for Mongolians, those who can speak English, and they love it
hmm,
there. And I've
how
always, and
interesting.
yeah, and
The
I always ask,
Mongolia Ireland connection. I didn't have that on my bingo card.
isn't that strange? And I have
Yeah.
been recommending, people who want to go study in an English speaking country, I say, think about Ireland. I've never been there. I've always wanted to go there, and I will go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very popular. That a lot of Mongolians in Switzerland too. But
Hmm.
the Irish connection it was odd, two
Right.
drivers in a row, and
So we
they start.
have, I just want to interrupt you just for a second, Philip. We have Arya Ravenswood is also watching. I'm not sure where she's hailing from, but I just want to make sure
Hmm.
that we're getting those viewers engaged here. So we're just going to wait a couple more minutes, folks, and we're going to start. Sorry, you were saying two cab riders in a row talking about Mongolia Ireland connection. What was
Yeah,
this in Ireland or in Mongolia?
no, this was in Mongolia. This was last week. I was getting a ride out to
How about that? Who
my
knew?
And I get in the cab and they start speaking to me in English, and I say, "Where did you learn English?" And two cab drivers in a row. They've lived in Ireland for several years, so I said, "Wow, I've always wanted to go, never been, not yet, but I will." When I was a kid, I used to dream about Ireland.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I guess Arya is from Yorkshire, UK. So that's awesome.
Yorkshire.
Yeah, we got a lot of sort of British Isles. If I'm not sure our Irish friend will appreciate the term British Isles, but whatever, that series of islands over there that includes Britain and Ireland and the Scottish Islands. So yeah, this is awesome. So we're just gonna wait, I think maybe 5 more minutes tops, and then we'll get rolling.
Let's
just see if we can get a few more viewers. Things started a little bit late, and there's a lot of difficulty involved with getting this rolling. So yeah, and I'm actually going to switch over, take this headset off.
All right.
Okay, so got that off, and then all right. So if there's anyone else watching, if you throw up a comment there, we will get you recognized. So if you're watching, throw up a comment in the chat. We'll get you recognized, and we're going to wait about 3 more minutes, and then Philip is going to start with his presentation on the Holy Roman Empire, and we'll just go from there. How's that sound?
That sounds good.
Fantastic.
I've got a little echo coming back at me. I hope it's okay. Can you hear me all right?
If you go to your YouTube and click on mute and mute the YouTube, it's delayed. There's a delay between the StreamYard and
okay. It says it's okay now.
Yep.
And so I wouldn't know how to do that.
So folks who are watching, just throw up a comment in the chat there, and we'll get you recognized, give you a shout out. Yeah, so Philip, if you just go to the YouTube tab, did you open a second YouTube tab, or do you just have StreamYard?
No, I'm just streaming here. It seems to be okay now, is everything okay on your end? Okay, all right, fine. It was just a temporary glitch, I guess.
Well, we're starting here about 10 minutes late. We just wanted to get some participation. We're at 7 viewers, so we'll just go ahead and start here. We got 8 now. So again, viewers, please, if you write a comment in the comment box, we will give you a shout out. Although Philip's going to do his presentation here on the Holy Roman Empire, then I'm going to do a presentation on the Sola-Busca Tarochi. That's sort of the smoking gun linking the Venetian oligarchs to Moloch worship and active use of ritual magic. And so we're going to be talking about that. And then at the end, we're going to do 30 to 90 minutes of viewer Q&A. And so, yeah, please just comment if you're watching this, and we'll give you a shout out. If you comment in the next 1 minute, we'll give you a shout out. Otherwise, we're going to just have Philip go ahead and start.
Yeah, this is exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. And please be aware, folks, that thank you, P. Scott, for that great comment. And thank you, Arya, for sharing this out, and would appreciate any share. Sharing is really the best thing to help get this information out there, and just, so that way we can refine our knowledge. Philip and I both believe that while we have a decent handle on what's going on, we can always improve our knowledge base, refine it, correct any mistakes, that sort of thing. So I think we're probably just going to go ahead and get started now, folks. We got just shy of 10 watching. So Philip, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and launch into your section on the Holy Roman Empire. And this is going to be really brief, folks. Then we're going to do a much deeper dive, probably even multiple episodes, I would guess, eventually, on the Holy Roman Empire and the Holy Roman emperors, because that's a very rich subject. And then we just had Christopher Shaw show up, so giving him a shout out as well. We have Casey in Bolt. Hey guys, Casey Packchill here. Oh wow. Great timing. I just invoked that name in my poem earlier today. I might have seen that.
Hey Casey.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, some great folks. So we're just going to go ahead, and I'm going to leave this one up for now. Philip,
thank you. There's a nice comment there.
That is a nice comment. And
Philip, really nice.
Yeah, if you're ready, brother, we'll go ahead and launch into to your presentation, and then we'll go for there. And viewers, please feel free to do chats or super chats, especially if you have a question. All super chats will be directly answered, guaranteed, or super stickers, whatever. We'll probably end up answering everyone's questions, but it's nice if we get a little bit of energetic love back our direction. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them on the side. And if you can put those in all caps, if it's a question you want answered. And of course, super chats and
Good
super
idea.
stickers are greatly appreciated. So, Philip, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and launch into your section. How's that sound?
That sounds good. I'm as ready. I'm as ready as I'll ever be. Uh, in the build up to this, I did my research was going all over the place, Ian. I swear I was doing some research into the tarot, which of
Mm-hmm.
course is a completely new area for me. I was even researching super soldiers. I was all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
investigating things I'd never even considered or that I'd kind of written off. I just didn't know where to go with this. And then just very recently, I found some information that was just kind of exactly perfect. And um, I wish I had had more time to assimilate it all. It's all very new, things I didn't know about. Going
Mm-hmm.
back to 1982, I found several articles all coming from 1982
That's interesting.
about the restoration of the Holy Roman Empire, the possibility of the restoration of the Holy Roman Empire.
Wow.
And I and I
80s?
yes, the 80s.
Wow. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
And it's interesting because I'd been thinking about the 80s, and a lot of young people are interested in the 80s, and I have vague memories of the 80s. And one thing that I've as a theme that's been coming up, I've been uh, talking to my friends. I said, "Do you notice that back in the 80s there was more openness? That is, now if you talk, let's say you talk about MK Ultra." Today, people say, "Oh my God, that's conspiracy theory." A lot of things that you talk about today. But if you go back to the 80s, it was a lot. There were people basically openly talking about it on mainstream media. And the 80s, looking back, I think can be a very exciting time to investigate because it's right on the doorstep of our own paradigm, and we can see foreshadowing of what we're going through today. And that's what I uncovered when I met when I met Karl von Habsburg in 2014. We
Mm-hmm.
had a really nice little chat. I told him about my plans for Mongolia, and he was very supportive. And there was talk at that time about the among his he had an assistant, his little sort of coterie. There was talk about restoration of the Holy Roman Empire, or at least the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and I had thought that it was just maybe the rumblings of some new cool kind of possibility that was opening up. And when I discovered these articles, I found that no, this was a really big topic back in the early 80s, the restoration of the Holy Roman Empire.
Hmm.
And also the idea of creation of a new Hitler. And these two ideas are run parallel.
Were they saying a Hitler to become the Holy Roman Emperor, or were they saying that these two things existed in parallel somehow? Or
Well, as with a lot of agendas with this grouping or this gang, if you will,
Mhm.
it's kind of a mashup. There are times when you see that this was uh, as a kind of I lost your image there. I hope that's not indicative of. I hope. Can you hear me fine? Uh, something's gone wrong. I haven't
I tried
touched
to buy
anything, but I.
my food, Philip, and I wanted to do that off camera, and then it took me a
Oh,
second to figure out how to turn it back on.
oh,
Go ahead,
all,
please continue.
all right. Okay. So, uh, it's kind of funny. You sometimes get the sense with the black nobility, that they're kind of like, in some ways, like falling all over each other, and there's strange, unlikely alliances, and then there's backstabbing, and then there's, agendas that sort of run parallel, but then they tend to uh, collide with one another and cancel each other out. And that's the case here with this issue of the new Hitler versus the Holy Roman Empire, the restoration of the Holy Roman Empire, which, interestingly, they had two sort of parallel two tracks where this was going to be possible. And the first one, the one that was the most popular, was through Otto von Habsburg, who was the father of Karl von Habsburg. Was generally the consensus that he would take the role of the emperor, and he had support of both the northern and the southern tiers of nobility. And so what they were going to do, I've typed out all my notes because I had so many new articles, and I had to go and sort of take pieces from articles and my own thoughts and cobble them all together. So if I look down, it's because a lot of this stuff is completely new to me.
No worries.
So the plan was to reinstate the Holy Roman Empire as an overarching institution that would unite smaller regional ethnic groupings that today exist. They exist today as echoes of the feudal system of the Middle Ages. And then what we had talked about, I said, I suspect that these noble families, this aristocracy, still reign supreme. And that's sort of what I found a confirmation of that going back to the 80s, in which today, and today maybe even more so, and I'll argue at the end why I think it's probably even more so. A dual reality exists in which the fiefdoms of the HRE, the Holy Roman Empire, still exist, and they're run by ultra-secret network of mediatized princes and nobles. Mediatized meaning they're subordinate, they're vassals to higher authorities. So you have the Auersperg, Esterhazy, the Fürstenberg, the Fugger, Hohenlohe, Lobkowitz, Orsini, signed Wittgenstein, Schwarzenegger, Thurn and Taxis. So this medieval system exists today under a deceptively modern system of states shaped by the Republican movements of the 18th and 19th centuries. So this underlying Holy Roman Empire has never gone away. We might not get through all this, and that's okay. There's a lot here. The Thurn and Taxis family is the one that I want to focus on most, because they ran the universal post of the empire. And at least as of 1982, I need to have more time to look at what's going on to date with this family. But they still, as of 1982, they still directed the Venetian intelligence that was once at the core of the empire, which operates through secret societies and orders, but also the mafias, which I will get into maybe next time with the P2 Freemason scandal, which is happening around the same time. You have the eruption of the P2 scandal, you have the assassination attempt of Pope John Paul II, and these are all very much connected.
Wow.
I found evidence of the Thurn and Taxis. Well, people were saying Thurn and Taxis was involved in the assassination attempt on the Pope.
Wow. Please continue.
These are allegations, of course. But as of the 80s, as this is in the 80s, 1982, the Thurn and Taxis fortune, which comprised banking, raw materials, and vast real estate holdings, including their own town of Regensburg, and they have 8 castles was estimated at 5 billion. So, adjust that for today's currency, and probably it was a lot more than 5 billion back then. That's another thing people don't quite understand. These people are phenomenally wealthy beyond what most people can even imagine,
Right.
and tremendously powerful. So the Turn and Taxis, at least in 1982, occupied the top spot in the princely system that actually was directing Otto von Habsburg, the Archduke of Austria, in this direction to be, the kingpin, the emperor. So, adding to the idea was adding to the German regions of Württemberg, which is headed today by His Royal Highness Duke Karl of Württemberg and Bavaria, which is run by the Wittelsbach family even today. In the new Holy Roman Empire, you would also have South Tyrol, Liechtenstein, Austria, as well as the renewed, back in the 80s, an effort to liberate Hungary and form a Danube Federation of Romania, Bulgaria, Yugoslavia, and Albania. And apparently, Otto von Habsburg is very public, especially with the pan-European movement, which some people might argue was really his baby. Back in the 80s, he represented Bavaria in the European Parliament, and he would make public pronouncements regarding this effort to restore the Holy Roman Empire in a kind of euphemistic term, world federalist. In which you would sort of parallel, it's just like the United States, but it's the United States of Europe. That's all it is. So you have the second restoration track, the sort of an alternative to Otto would have been through they had some immediate possibilities, such as through the House of Braganza of Portugal, which is still very powerful. Or they could have promoted in Bavaria the power of the Wittelsbach, or the House of Savoy in Italy. And I just saw that Prince Aimone of the House of Savoy has just moved back from Russia. He's been living in Russia for 30 years, and he's just decided to move back to Italy. So I wonder what that means. He didn't make a statement that these people are above politics, so he's not going to engage in any kind of polemic regarding Russia and Ukraine. He just said it's time for me to come home, and this just happened like a couple of weeks ago. So then I found on Instagram there's an Instagram page that covers the royals, and it's somebody who's completely besotted with the royals. I mean, they just worship them, and it's kind of funny to see that perspective. They don't at all see the dark side. They don't at all see the real power. They're just completely dazzled by the pageantry.
Yeah, and I mean, I honestly think the vast majority of people are just very kind-hearted, and they can't kind of imagine the darkness that you and I have discovered. But please continue.
Right. That there is that psychological barrier that you and I've discussed before. So then, with this plan for the restoration of the Holy Roman Empire and bringing Otto von Habsburg to fulfill the role, you had mixed up in these plans the plans to create a new Hitler, which could have been accomplished. Which the plan, interestingly, like the first one, right, had British support, but also had enjoyed a great deal of support from the Italian and Bavarian black nobility, such as Turn and Taxis. Turn and Taxis had been close advisors to the Wittelsbach, who helped shape the Bavarian Nazi Party. So we recall that the British, or maybe people don't know this, mobilized the Anglo-American banking establishment support for Hitler, as far as I understand, was an attempt. They were hoping that they could get Hitler to drive east into Russia and take Russia. while this was the British wish, I think as far as FDR, he was kind of hoping that, or at least the Americans, at least in intelligence circles, were kind of hoping that Hitler would help destroy the British Empire. They were feeling a little bit of it was a competitive period. So while the British were sort of mobilizing Hitler as sort of this a martial law directed at Russia, many of the continental cousins, the Hanoverians, the Hohenzollern, the Wittelsbach, and others, saw him as a potential spearhead for mass movements that might lead to their own restoration, which Hitler had been clever enough to promise them, that they would be restored to their former glory through supporting him, that he would kick off a movement that would pave the way for their restoration. So, but the Habsburgs never openly promoted Hitler. Otto, I think, spoke against him. He openly opposed him, as I recall. But there were many houses that backed him. Soon after 1938, they began to distance themselves, especially after the Anschluss. And then they were actually just, wanted nothing further to do with him after the defeat at Stalingrad. But by 1982, my God, it's just the most fascinating year. There's just, in the course of investigating this, it's so humbling to realize how much I don't know. And I felt like I was wrestling this octopus. Literally, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this presentation. This is just like an octopus with 1,000 tentacles.
Yeah, it really
so, but anyway, by 1982, many of the same oligarchies seemed poised to make the same mistake by creating a new Hitler through their strategists that centers like the Club of Rome and the European cultural, the Club of Rome with their Malthusian policies, right? Well, apparently there's also a European Cultural Foundation that is supposed to be even more important than Bilderberg. So, but this is, this is serious stuff. The plan, apparently, according to analysts back then, this plan would have eliminated 2 to 3 billion people directly as a result of the Malthusian policies that such a project would generate. There were some who thought Otto von Habsburg could be the new Hitler or the new emperor, and some were proposing a completely different entity. One of them was a guy named Armin Mohler, who had been in the Swiss SS, who was heading the Siemens Foundation, and several members of the Dominican and similarly anti-Augustinian circles within the Vatican. These circles that promote the idea of imago Dei, that man is created in the image of God, and that we labor on this earth to be to prosper, to multiply, to make discoveries, to evolve. This was the faction. The main figurehead in this was Pope John Paul II, but he was opposed by Malthusians within the Vatican. Which the subject of the assassination attempt on John Paul that's another huge kettle of fish, which I would love to get into and link it to maybe Torn and Taxis, but also the P2 scandal.
Yeah, we should do an episode for sure.
So then another candidate was Manfred Rommel. The name is probably familiar, Rommel, who was the mayor of Stuttgart. He trained in the UK while at the same time that his father was fighting the British in North Africa. And he was encouraging the spread of something called Strassreich counterculture in Württemberg. This will be familiar too. This artificial counterculture to break down resistance to the imposition of ultimately a one world government, where you have a coalition or a loose coalition of Greens, of anarchists, and anthroposophists. I don't know. You probably know more about the anthroposophists with Gertrude Steiner, right?
Well, not Gertrude Stein, but
No. Oh, I
Rudolf.
said Gertrude. Yeah, Rudolf. Rudolf Steiner.
Yeah.
I remember my violin teacher was followed Rudolf Steiner. He was an anthroposophist. I didn't, I didn't know any more than that. So we have then to muddy the waters even more. It was clear that the self-interested British support, aided by some Bavarian and South German families, was going to interfere with the Habsburg restoration, to which the British had also given their token blessing. So they're working for one thing that might end up sabotaging another avenue. It's very opportunistic and very cutthroat. So then, to gain support for this idea, this was very interesting to me. Both the British and the Soviets approached Prince Louis Ferdinand Hohenzollern, the head of the Kaiser's house.
Oh.
If the prince agreed to support a neutral Germany, the Brits and some Soviet factions would even consider promoting the restoration.
Did you see the recent thing where a German nobleman was supposedly going to be involved in a far right
Yeah.
coup d'etat in Germany? Did you see that? Is he from that same Hohenhauser house? If he's not directly, he's definitely like in that general German royalty milieu. I can look it up while you're talking. Go ahead.
Yeah, my sense with him is that he was a bit of an, this could be slander, I'm not sure, but that he was a bit of an eccentric, and he was standing outside the family structure a little bit, taking things into his own hands, probably out of some personal frustration. That's what he was accused of, but I think he was probably more cogent than that. And I need to drill down into that a little more. Yeah, that's a fascinating story.
So it's Heinrich the 13th, and he's a minor member of the family. I don't know what family he comes from, but it was Heinrich the 13th, and this just happened in December. He was arrested as being part of a coup attempt in Germany. I won't. I just thought that was an interesting parallel to what you're kind of talking about, or similar machinations. Go ahead, please continue.
Yeah, it could be, sort of an understandable kind of it's hard to say. I don't want to make judgments about the guy. I know, of course, when any movement is labeled far right and sort of called kooky and stuff, you got to watch out. These are probably people with some very solid ideas and a very understandable, justifiable agenda, which I know that the movement he represented had genuine grievances.
Mm-hmm.
So then I found this interview. This was fascinating stuff, where the concept of the new Hitler and a restored Holy Roman Empire under Otto von Habsburg was brought together. The two concepts sort of fused, and the narrative that was proposed. There was a guy named Monsignor Arrigo Pintonello. He was an honorary military archbishop and representative of what they called the dark side of the Vatican, so the more Malthusian side. Born in Venice, traced his lineage back to Austro-Hungarian nobility. He trained in Rome at the Jesuit Command Center, so effectively he was a Jesuit, which the Gregorian University, he was a leading exponent of the Palermo Sicilian-based Tula Society. Maybe you've heard about the Tula Society.
Yep.
So these were adherents of the Nordic race cults who were working to create and impose a new Führer over demoralized Europe. In it. So there's an interview from 1982 where this quote is amazing. He makes himself very clear and he articulates and as sort of a megaphone for this agenda. He says, "A new Hitler would be desirable, but Hitler's psychological mistake was to superimpose the German race over others. We know that the German race, the Anglo-Saxon people, are the best, but Hitler's method was wrong. What we require now is a king for Europe, and that king must be a successor to Franz Joseph of the Austro-Hungarian throne, Otto von Habsburg."
Wow.
So he then expounds, just to give you a sense of the nature of how this sort of echoes of the old Holy Roman Empire would be played out. He goes on to talk about how Europe would be restructured in what he considered to be a time of chaos. 1982. He says, "Italy is too heterogeneous. Garibaldi was wrong. North and South should never have been one country. In the future, we can create a state with Piedmont, Lombardy, Veneto, and Tuscany, and then another in the south, Sicily, Sardinia, Calabria. They must go their own way. We need a federation of regions for all of Europe headed by a chief. We need a new Holy Roman Empire. Such a union would be desirable and hoped for. We could then diffuse German culture." The Holy Roman Empire is in the hands of the German people, the Anglo-Saxon people. I want to recall this is too much. He says, "I want to recall what Hitler said. Ein Volk, ein Führer, and what was the third word? Ein Reich." I'm very favorable to the idea of a new Hitler, but without the mistakes. People thought that Hitler was crazy. They are wrong. He had defects.
Wow.
He had no culture. In the future project, the chief must be Otto von Habsburg.
Wow.
And then he goes on to expound on basically the natural foundational justifications for monarchy. He says, in nature, there is a necessity of a chief. There is a natural value of hierarchy, and why not a hierarchy in society? And so, a monarchy. Nature creates all things, and so the process will be, everybody must obey a chief. That is the law. He who wants to change it is outside the law. Americans don't understand this. In the last war, they made a mistake. Americans are guilty. They were on the wrong side, working with the enemies of mankind, as Russia against the Germans. This generated a decadence in Europe. It is now only possible to save Europe with a monarchy.
Wow. That's so interesting because they, that's a very similar argument that Patton made not long before he probably got assassinated. He died under strange circumstances, and he essentially said, and again, I just want to be clear, I am not espousing this. I am simply repeating what General Patton said. General Patton said the U.S. should have supported Germany to fight Russia instead of supporting Russia to fight Germany. And so I'm not agreeing with that. I'm also not disagreeing with that. I'm simply stating what Patton said in the way it echoes very much. What was that, a Habsburg you said was making all these statements, or were they?
No. He's a Monsignor. He's a Monsignor in belonging to this sort of cabal of Malthusian dark side.
Guy?
I'm sorry?
He's a Vatican person? He's from the Vatican?
He was a Monsignor, and he ran a college, a very exclusive college. He was a Jesuit, basically. He was an agent of the Jesuits, and he had a lot of influence. but this sort of anti-Russian thing, I'm wondering if it still is not still tied up, with this whole antipathy, this ancient antipathy between the Khazarian, the Russians wiped out the Khazarian Empire, and then
Right.
you have this this hatred that goes back to that, and then those those who carried this hatred into Europe was then picked up and used by the Western aristocracy as a justification. They sort of harnessed this hatred as a way to try to force their way into Russia, because in my view, there's an unbelievable wealth of natural resources and gold as well.
Yeah.
So I don't
Of,
understand.
oh, sorry,
Or
go
if
ahead.
it's racial, it has to do with the Slavicness, or just I don't really know. But it was interesting to me uh, to see this coming up in 1982. I How much of it was a reaction to Russianness? How much of it was a reaction to Bolshevism?
Yeah.
Uh, one gets the sense that labels like Bolshevist or Marxist, that these are labels used by they're used to sort of hoodwink ordinary people into buying into ideologies. Meanwhile, at the top, there's an entirely different kind of game going on,
Right.
because he goes on to say it is a race against the Marxist threat. And today, what is the ruling elite at the Club of Rome? What are they using?
They're Frankfurt School of Communism, 100%.
Marxism. So back in the 82, that was the threat. Now they flipped the script, and then he goes on. There are symptoms that we are winning. The defeat of Schmidt in Germany helps our project. And Schmidt his administration was completely destroyed. He says, for a time, Kohl and Strauss will rule until people become disillusioned, as they are in Italy with the Christian Democrats. But I know Strauss personally, and he is a superior man. I can assert with certainty that Strauss is in favor of the project of making Otto von Habsburg the king of Europe. There are some young people close to Strauss who are being trained right here. And that's where he's referring to this campus called the Collegio Selva dei Pini, a 400-student school that the Monsignor directs. And he says that the school is based on the Anglo-Saxon model. It's like Oxford or Eton. So it's probably just a big Jesuit brainwashing center. And then the button on the thing later in the interview, he suddenly switches. This is the interview says he switches from Italian to German, and he says, apropos of nothing, he says, the Jews were the first people on earth, the most important folk. Here too, Hitler made a mistake.
Wow, that's creepy. Any kind of like supremacist thing I always find to be very creepy, So, well, Philip, I think that in the interest of time, we're going to have to do a further deep dive on the Holy Roman Empire and this thread where you're connecting like the attempted assassination of John Paul II, this attempted Holy Roman Empire revivalist movement in the 1980s, in the 20th century, for God's sake, late 20th century, post World War II is just stunning. It's not surprising. But, the church always wants a new Holy Roman Emperor if he's under the domination of the church. They don't really like that Holy Roman Empire that's going against the church. And so
it's a fascinating dynamic.
Never happened is they don't trust to give anyone that level of power. And, I do have to wonder if this Heinrich the 13th thing is somehow linked to perhaps an ultra recent attempt at this revival. So, Philip, if you're okay, if you want to like just closing thoughts there, and then we will go much deeper and feature a lot of these threads on future episodes. And we got a super chat here that I want to read here in a second before I go into mine. but we'll probably answer that at the end. But did you have any final thoughts just to wrap up there?
Just that, I'm just, again, to remind people that it's still kind of an idea that's been floating around. At least now, perhaps it's been scaled back to a reinstatement of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And I thought, well, that kind of makes sense. You could have kind of this buffer, more rich, diverse sort of entity between Russia and Western Europe. That might be a good thing. But I think my friend, Dr. Jerzy Toman, before he passed away, he said to me, he said, I said, but I was going to Mongolia, and he said, spread propaganda for Karl.
I remember you saying that. Yeah, it's interesting.
And, like I said before, I think Karl is a wonderful man. He's got a great heart. But of course, in the real world of power politics and above power, I mean, we're talking about levels that make politics look like tinker toys. These forces, these powers are they're very difficult even for me to get my head around. So we'll get more into it. It's interesting. I just had one question. We don't have to necessarily get into this, but I'd like at some point if you could give some insights as to what, in your mind, these entities of the Holy Roman Empire and the Pope, what do they represent within the human psyche? That might be an interesting topic. I think you could probably.
Yeah. That is interesting, and that's something we'll have to explore at a future. When we go deeper on this, I think that is a really interesting way to discuss it. So, if you're feeling complete, Philip, I'm probably going to dive into mine real quick. I want to say, KDP just put up a question. It looks like she's either wanting astrological work or perhaps, she just clarified she does want me to ask the angels on this. So, Katie, are you going to be here, Katie, at the 30 minutes from now? Can I do my presentation first? You did do a super chat, so I want to make sure we get to this while you're online. I could do it now. I'd prefer to do it at the end of the show. I haven't ever done a live chat, wide beam communing with the angels before, so it would, it would take me a sec to drop into that space and so forth. If you're willing to let me do this at the end, that would be my great preference, but you will be first in line. Are you going to be around, Katie? I'm just going to put that.
This is wonderful.
So I'm just going to, I don't know if maybe she's not hearing for some reason, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that question there. In how long around? It'd be in 30 minutes, Katie? It would be, I'm going to try and have real tight 30-minute presentation on the Sola-Busca Tarochi, and then I can answer your question at the end. This will also be up afterwards, so if you can't watch it live, you can come back and watch it, and I will put viewer Q&A. So it looks like Katie said that she'll be around. So we'll go ahead and do Katie's question at the top of the Q&A section. And I'm going to go ahead and launch into my part of things. So I'm just going to real quick put up a banner here. Yeah, and I need to learn how to spell, apparently. No, is that not right? Oops. Oh my goodness. Holy smokes, I cannot type today. I don't know. I'm an astrologer, and yet I tempted fate by saying, we're doing it. I don't care if Mercury's retrograde, and we haven't yet. Oops, I want that to be a ticker. Let me hide that. Let's see if I can make it a ticker. And so, yeah, let's see if we get this to go now. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and launch into it. And so for a while, I've been wondering, can I actually prove what I was told by the angels and the Egyptian god Thoth, and other spirits, that there was this dynamic between Luciferians and Molochians, and that the world is actually ruled by the Venetian black nobility who worship Moloch. And for a long time, I had little threadbare connections, like the fact that the Venetian black nobility are Tyrian, meaning from Lebanon in Tyre. That's where they originate from. And that those who lived in Lebanon and Tyre during that era worshipped Moloch, or the name that they went by is Hammon Baal, or Baal Ammon. And so, that was kind of like the strongest connection that I could actually get, which was pretty threadbare at best, and a bit of a reach, right? Because Alexander crushes Tyre sometime around, I want to say 400 BC, thereabouts, I think 350 maybe.
Right.
Then he, after crushing Tyre, the Tyrians move eventually en masse either to Carthage in North Africa. A lot of them fled there, and that would lead to the rising of like Hannibal and the Punic Wars. They definitely worshipped Moloch openly in Carthage. There's no question about that in the historical record, none. And then the rest, and I would say that probably at least half of them, or the greater portion, they moved to Rome to become Roman senators. And then eventually, as the Roman Empire fails, they moved to Venice, and they start up the banks of the Rialto, where kind of Philip and I really start to follow this thread. So again, that's pretty dubious, right? Like that was over 2,000 years before like medieval times, when the Venetians were operating really heavily. So what evidence is there that connects the Venetian oligarchy to Moloch worship and to the use of black magic? I found it. So this book is called The Game of Saturn, Decoding the Sola-Busca Tarochi. And I'm just going to read what Peter Mark Adams says here in the cover of the book, or the inner leaflet, whatever you call that. The Game of Saturn is the first full-length scholarly study of the enigmatic Renaissance masterwork known as the Sola-Busca Tarot. And I'm going to real quick do it. If I can figure out how to do this, I'm going to do my absolute best. I'm going to show the Sola-Busca Tarochi here. So give me just a second if I can get that to work. Let's see, share screen. Okay, we'll see if this is going to work. There we go. All right, can you see that, Philip?
It's loading, yes.
Okay, great. All right, so this is the Sola-Busca Tarochi, just some of the cards. It's not all of them. And you can see like some really interesting characters, medieval artwork, but to a lot of people, they're just going to look at this and be like, who cares? It's just another tarot deck. Except for the thing is that there's a lot of hints within this deck that there's something much, much, much deeper at play. And so I'm going to read this cover leaf again. The Game of Saturn is the first full-length scholarly study of the enigmatic Renaissance masterwork known as the Sola-Busca Tarot. It reveals the existence of a pagan, liturgical, and ritual tradition active amongst members of the Renaissance elite, specifically a Venetian oligarch, and encoded within the deck. Beneath its beautifully decorated surface, its imagery ranges from the obscure to the grotesque. We encounter scenes of homoeroticism, which was, I believe, the death penalty in Italy at the time, in the late 1400s. I believe it was the death penalty if you caught being involved in homosexual acts. It was definitely like extremely frowned upon, to put it mildly. Wounding, immolation, and decapitation redolent of hidden meanings, violent transformations, and obscure rites. For the first time in over 500 years, the clues embedded within the cards reveal a dark Gnostic grimoire, replete with pagan theurgical and astral magic rites. Careful analysis demonstrates that the presiding deity of this cult object is none other than the Gnostic demiurge in its most archaic and violent form. I somewhat disagree with the author on that point. The Afro-Levantine serpent dragon, Baal Hammon, also known as Kronos and Saturn, though most notoriously as the biblical Moloch.
Mhm.
Conveyed from Constantinople to Italy in the dying years of the Byzantine Empire, the pagan Platonist George Gemostus Platon sought to ensure the survival of the living essence of the Neoplatonic theurgy by transplanting it to the elite families of the Italian Renaissance. Within that violent and sorcerous milieu, Platon's vision of a theurgically enlightened elite mutated into its dark shadow. A Saturnian brotherhood operating within a cosmology of predation, I would say parasitism even, which sought to channel the draconian current to preserve elite wealth, power, and control. This development marks the birth of an illumined elite 3 centuries before Weishaupt's Illuminati. And they're talking about Adam Weishaupt and the infamous and actually historically real Bavarian Illuminati. People love to throw out the word Illuminati, Jay-Z and Beyonce, blah, 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 blah. No. There was an actual historical group in the late 1700s known as the Bavarian Illuminati that had pretty vast political and philosophical goals.
And they, sorry to interject, but they also, they came out of the Alumbrados from Spain. So you had the Illuminati go back another 2 centuries before.
Right. This is even saying 3 centuries. So
yeah, at least.
Mm-hmm. So this deck captures the essence of this magical tradition and constitutes a Western terma whose talismanic properties may serve to establish an initiatory link with the current, meaning the Molochian current. Peter Mark Adams explores the historical context for the deck's creation against the background of tense Pharisee and Venetian diplomatic intrigue and espionage. At the time this deck was made in Ferrara, the Venetians had just crushed them in a really brutal internecine Italian noble conflict. The recovery of the decks and code of narratives constitute a significant contribution to Renaissance scholarship, art, history, tarot studies, and the history of Western esotericism. So I haven't read this book all the way through, but the gist of it is this person does deep, and I mean deep research on how this Sola-Busca Tarochi is absolutely a cult object, and that it shows astromagical rites, astromagic in this case being where you're drawing down the energies of certain planets and stars, and echoes of Mithraic tradition. There's very bizarre and strange Roman historical figures who really don't make any sense if we're talking about very famous and popular Roman figures, but they make a lot of sense if there's a hidden message based on what that particular Roman center was involved in. And one example, just to break this down, is you see this rather brutal cover, and you can see that they're sitting there and they're talking about fate and all the stuff about fate. But if you look right here, there's a Medusa head, and the left eye is being pierced by a spear. Now, Medusa, the constellation, the left eye of Medusa, the constellation, is the fixed star Algol. And Algol is considered like the dark sorcery star. And it's particularly used in violent magic. And so this is the left eye of the Medusa constellation, and specifically the dark star that's used as particularly for, oh gosh, what's the correct term for it? For its baneful magic is what it would be called in magic, modern magical circles. So that that is magic that you're using, black magic specifically to harm and do damage to folks who are, basically getting your crosshairs as a dark magician. So this Sola-Busca Tarochi shows, it came out around 1491, I think it was completed, something like that. Really interesting, fascinating artwork, so much symbolism, so rich, so much information, tons of Saturnian symbolism all throughout it. And just very, very, very strange stuff. But it comes out in 1491. An unknown Venetian oligarch paid a vast fortune to someone who clearly was a polymath genius, who was extremely studied in ritual magic, in astrology, in the history of Rome and also the history of a lot of the Near East. And so those, just the depth of knowledge displayed by this individual, use of colors, just use of all manner of different occult and esoteric symbolism, use of the kind of astral magic that's shown in the Picatrix, and other magical texts. This person was like a super genius, whoever made this deck. And the fact that it survived basically in perfection for 500 years. It was kept by a very wealthy series of Italian wealthy families, and they recognized the significance of the deck, and they kept it very careful and in pristine condition to where it's, I forget exactly what museum it's in right now, but it's in a museum on display. And the author of it just, again, went incredibly deep into showing how this is an initiatory deck. So you would use this tarot in part during magical rites and initiations to initiate people into the Saturnian or Molochian current, and to begin to embed in their psyche through symbolism some of the rites and practices of this Saturnian brotherhood. So this is really huge because it shows that as late as 1491, nearly 2,000 years after the fall of Tyre to Alexander, some very wealthy Venetian oligarchs were absolutely 100% involved in black magic and the worship of Moloch. Boom, mic drop. Thesis, in my opinion, proven. Because if it lasts 2,000 years, is it really a big ask to think that this doesn't last another 500 years, especially when the trappings and symbolism of this are literally everywhere? If you go back and watch the Venetian Black Nobility 1 series, I point out how the black cube is just frickin' everywhere, and black cube related symbolism. And so for me, this is like, it's still not, it's not a bunch of, we don't have video, right now of current Venetian black nobility families engaged in Moloch worship. But this is really, really solid evidence that at a bare minimum, at the height of Venetian power, there was still at least one family, and very likely, I don't think it's unreasonable to extrapolate that more than one family had continued Moloch worship for 2,000 years after the fall of Tyre. That's incredible. And if something continues for 2,000 years among people who are ultra elite and powerful, and then you see this deck very carefully preserved by wealthy Italian families, that tells me that there was extreme significance was put on this information. And it shows also that there was practical magic or ritual magic to achieve real-world causative effects was being employed at a minimum by the family who commissioned this tarot deck. So there's like lots more, and I'm going to do an entire lengthy presentation on this once I've completed this text and done a little bit of my own research. But in the interest of time, I would love to start going to some of these questions we have in here. Now, I did promise Katie that I would do her question first, and so this is going to be a little bit odd for me. I will say I'm not sure how often I'm going to do this sort of thing in the future because it does take energy out of me, and I feel a little funny doing a communing with the angels on live television. Or whatever, live YouTube. I would prefer to, generally speaking, to answer questions more related to the videos, but Katie was very generous, gave us a super chat, so I'm going to go ahead and answer her question now as best I can. So bear with me for a minute. I am just going to close my eyes, get centered, and invoke Archangel Michael to answer a question. So I'm just going to go ahead and put it up, and then we'll answer all the questions in order. Please put your questions in all caps, or do a super chat or super sticker that makes them easier to see, and those are guaranteed to be answered, though likely we will answer all of them. So give me just a moment here. Archangel Michael, KDP has asked to see if Jordan will want to be in a relationship and accept her children in the future. So what he is saying, Katie, is he's saying that this is a possibility in the future, but it is dependent upon you doing inner work and inner transformation around scarcity and self-worth. And that if you can learn to experience and acknowledge and have gratitude for the abundance existing in your life, you will begin to open up more to the potentials for abundance and move away from the fear that you have currently and the desire to bring this man into your life, in part to stabilize your sense of self and your feelings of abundance and being able to provide and protect for your children. And that if you reflect upon your self-worth and find that you are tremendously worthy of love and that it is your birthright and essence to feel this vibration of love within yourself, and as you dissolve the pain and lack you have around feelings of love, in particular in regards to your early childhood, that you will be able to attract him into your life. He also has work to do around fears of being locked into any given situation or commitment in general. He's been burned before in the past, and so he has concerns, and that's why he's in and out of this connection with you. The true work is for you to work on this self-worth and knowing that the universe through you will provide enough abundance to take care of you and your family, and that you are already protected, and that a masculine presence in your life needs to become a garnish on an otherwise beautiful dish. You are blessed by the celestial realms. Okay, hopefully that answered your question. Hopefully that was helpful. All right, let's see next questions. Okay, so
Wow, Ian. Wow.
yeah, well, I hope that was helpful for. I'm not even sure if Katie's still here. Hopefully that was helpful for her. I may or may not do that in the future because it feels
Very
odd.
difficult, very difficult. But I felt that you were really connecting to something which is remarkable to me because, as you know, I have very, very little knowledge or understanding of any of these these areas. These aspects that you delved into are completely unknown to me. So that was pretty remarkable for me to be here and see you do
Wow.
that.
Great. Yeah, I mean, this is what I do for people. It's one of the things I do along with, I teach angelic magic, I do spiritual counseling, and then I do astrology for folks. So it's one of the things it's one of the things I do to keep the lights on, right? So Param Sharma asks or says, "Love you guys," and then asks, "Who handles the Rothschilds? Do you know who the handlers or who the Rothschilds answer to, Philip?" I do not. I will say I do not.
I would say it's still the House of Hesse is still over them. The House of Hesse was the family that promoted them to begin with. House of Hesse still even has, I would say, authority over the House of Windsor, over the British monarchy. They are senior in authority, and that would be my best guess. But they're all, the Rothschilds are all spread out all over the place. So
They might
I
have
know,
different
I know,
handlers.
for instance, yeah, they're not anywhere near the top. The House of Torlonia is they are in charge of the Bank for International Settlements, and from what I understand, they basically run the U.S. Treasury through Vatican connected networks. So we're encouraged to look at the Rothschilds because they have been given the job of taking the spotlight, the public spotlight. The people who really have power and seniority and authority don't like the public spotlight. They don't get anything out of being famous or well known or celebrated. For them, that sort of thing is sort of repugnant. So
That's when you know you're dealing with ancient money. They don't want any kind of spotlight.
No, the idea that the common person would know who they were, or revere them, or extol them, or aspire to. This is just kind of a bit disgusting, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So
There.
the next question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Philip.
Yeah, go. No, I'm finished. Yeah. Go ahead.
So, please, by the way, viewers, like put your questions or comments in the chat there on the side, and as long as it's not like we did have a troll earlier, as long as it's not an obvious troll thing, it doesn't matter if you have something kind of contentious to say. We'll go ahead and address it, you know, within reason. Please don't get my channel banned by saying something insane, but I just won't put that up here on the banner. So the next question is from P. Scott in Ireland. And he says, who currently is the Max? I assume he means Maximus family, or perhaps there's a Maximus.
I think maybe the Massimo family.
Oh, maybe he. Well, I mean, Maximus used to be. That was the Orsini who used to be Maximus, right? In the senatorial days, I believe.
I think the Massimos. Some of the Massimos say, well, no. Some say, yeah, we go back to Roman. To the Roman emperors, but others say no, not really, and
well,
maybe it's. I think his
Orsini is descended from almost positive. I mean, go ahead. I'll look that up.
That is a difficult subject.
Yeah.
I don't want to get in trouble with them. If he's talking about the Massimo family, they tend to always end up in the center of everything, and also they don't appear on many of, you know, you say, oh, the 13 Zoroastrian families that really rule the world. You see this thing all the time, and these kinds of lists. Oddly enough, they're never on these lists, and some people say that they are the #1 most powerful family, and I don't even want to say the name of the head of the family. I really don't. I don't want to say it.
Yeah,
but we can go. I'm not. Yeah, I don't want to get into that. But we could, as we'll explore. Maybe I'll get into it at another time. The Massimo Brancaccio family, and then this is a very interesting subject.
So P. Scott,
they're top owners of the Vatican.
Go ahead. What, Philip?
Yeah, so as far as I know, they're top owners of the Vatican and connected with the Sovereign Military Order of Malta and other things.
Yeah, I don't know if we still got P. Scott here with us. I'm putting a little question to him down there for clarification.
Okay.
I think he means the Maximus clan. And the Maximus clan, Maximus back during the senatorial times, eventually then became the Orsini family.
I understood they became the Massimo family, but that's disputed.
Well, they might be. I mean, it was a long time ago now, the Roman Senate, so they could easily be two different branches. Both the Massimo and the Orsini may both claim descent from the Maximus clan. I mean, it's 2,000 plus years ago. It seems reasonable to me that there would be multiple threads to that.
Right. Yeah.
So does anyone else have any other questions for us? KDP says Roro fan. Not sure what that means. But
Roro fan.
I think I like it. Not sure. That's maybe in response to me answering her question there with the communing earlier. Here we got another question here. So this is from Similar Prisoners, and they write, are there any books or writings of the demiurge ever incarnating in human form throughout history? So I am not aware of them saying the demiurge incarnates. What is a theory that's out there, or belief, somewhere between theory and belief, is that there are... Well, first, let me back it up a little bit. The word for planets in Vedic astrology is Graha. And Graha means literally Caesar, not like Julius Caesar, but someone who seizes something, like I'm seizing my phone in my hands, right? That kind of seizing. So Caesar, one who seizes, that's what it literally means. Graha means Caesars. And what that means is that they say that when you're angry and aggressive and competitive and maybe like passionate wanting sex, but like aggressively, not like sensually, but like, ooh, I want to get in there. That energy, that means that they would say that Mangala or Mars has taken you over and is operating through you. So that happens to all of us all the time from a Vedic astrological point of view. If you're feeling really severe and punishing and authoritarian, Saturn or Shani is operating through you. If you're really generous and uplifting and like maybe having a feast or a party, Jupiter or Guru is operating through you. So there's even the bicameral mind, which is the ancients would write very similar stuff. They would say that they would witness as Zeus moved through them and they cheated on their wife or whatever. They would say things as though they observed that spirits took over and animated them in a certain way and they acted from that. And that's sometimes called the bicameral mind. And so there's books on this bicameral mind phenomenon. It's written off as like some kind of allegory or misapprehension of the ancients, and definitely not to be taken literally because none of that stuff exists. You know, as they always do with trying to cram all of reality into a dead materialist box and not even realizing that they're reinforcing Moloch and Moloch worship by pushing people into dead materialism. But to answer your question, there are at times individuals in history who act as temporary avatars of a specific planet. A classic example, and you can tell because these figures come out of nowhere, they rocket to the insane dizzying heights. We know many of them for, centuries later, and they just as quickly as they arise, they suddenly go away. And in fact, when they arise, when the planet is operating through them, they cannot be defeated by another mortal. They can't lose. They win every frickin' time. Every time they're up against a regular human, they're just going to win, no matter the situation. Classic example, Joan of Arc. Comes out of nowhere. She's this peasant woman in France. She becomes a Mars avatar, and suddenly she leads France to incredible victory after incredible victory after incredible victory after incredible victory. Just doesn't stop. She can't stop winning. Suddenly, Mars has done whatever it wanted to do to influence human history and consciousness. It flees from her. She's burned at the stake. She comes out of nowhere, rises up, can't be defeated. Sudden, incredible waterfall event, loss of power. Two other examples. This is more contentious among those who believe this, but I believe that Hitler was a Mars avatar and Stalin was a temporary Saturn avatar. And so the unstoppable force of Mars meant the immovable object of Saturn in Stalingrad. And Mars said, "You can't defeat me. I will win again and again and again." And Stalin/Saturn said, "I'm willing to let 2 million Russians die to hold Stalingrad for 3 days for my birthday to send a message." It just doesn't get any more Saturnian than that. Control, boundary, total death, complete disregard for human well-being. And so when the Mars avatar ran into the Saturn avatar defeated Mars because Saturn's dominant during this period of time, Kali Yugas. So there have been people who have incarnated from birth as an avatar, and I'll go ahead and continue to be contentious here. Many people say that Jesus Yeshua was a born solar avatar, as in the sun, the consciousness that's represented by the sun, operated through Jesus from his birth to his death. And during that entire time, just, reality worked around Jesus, and then Jesus allowed the end that we all know to have happened. So has the demiurge ever incarnated? Now, if by the demiurge you mean Saturn, because of that thing I read in the leaflet earlier, I'm not aware of Saturn ever having that level of incarnation, which is extremely rare where a planetary avatar incarnates. However, there is a book. Since you asked about books, let me see if I can find it real quick. Let's see here. Gosh, I'm trying to remember where I put that book and trying to remember the name of it. Yeah, it's by this guy. It may not be this book. It might be his Secret History of the World book by Mark Booth. And in the Secret History of the World, and possibly in this one, he talks about this phenomenon of planetary incarnations. And so if you mean the demiurge, and by the demiurge you mean Saturn, then I would recommend Mark Booth's The Sacred History or Mark Booth's Secret History of the World. I actually think it's in the Secret History of the World book, but I believe he covers that again in that book. So I don't know if that answers your question. That's a very interesting and kind of, I don't know if I want to say bizarre question, but that definitely challenges my level of information. Okay, so let me get caught up on the chat.
That's a great question. That was fascinating.
It was a great question, and it stumped me a bit. I'll be honest. I tried to answer it the best I could.
I thought, I thought it's a very interesting concept. Was Joan of Arc a Templar?
I am not aware that she was a Templar, although I think she was invited into some of those similar kind of orders. Real quick, I want to go down through these. She might have been, I guess she predates Rosicrucianism, if I remember correctly. She was almost certainly part of some of those societies of that era, but I'm not aware of a strong connection. I actually think I have heard that before, Templar. I'll have to ask Tim Hogan. That's where I could get an answer for that. So Katie wrote something about the Roth family, and she said, and isn't Satan the Moloch worshippers? Yes. Satan means only the adversary or the enemy, and that's all it means. I've heard it's from Hebrew. I've heard it's from ancient Greek. I'm not 100% clear on which one it actually is, but it simply means the adversary or the enemy. And quite clearly in the Old Testament, the recurring figure of the enemy is Moloch. It's what the Canaanites worshipped. It's who, other than Solomon, who married a Moloch worshiper, from Tyre, his wife is a Moloch worshiper, and that's why he fell from grace. Other than that, the Bible is pretty clear that Moloch is the bad guy, and that Moloch worship is very, against the teachings of Judaism. And so then credit to you, Philip. P. Scott says, thank you, Philip, answered your question. So you were right, I was wrong. He was referring to the Massimo family, not the Orsini. So you were correct.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah.
And so then similar prisoners, I guess, in response to temporary immortality makes sense. Well, I wouldn't say immortal. I just meant that they have the ability to, they're a planetary god, which means that their will can't be denied, more or less. And they're going to express very much as the kind of planetary god they are. But they're not immortal. They're probably not going to die while there's a planetary avatar operating through them. But I don't think they're bulletproof. They might naturally avoid any kind of situation where they get shot or whatever, but they just have almost unlimited charisma and ability to bend everything, including others and reality, to their will. So let's see. Then we have.
Can I just interject something? Really, I'm just wondering. I've heard about some people in battle. They become sort of inspired. They become incredibly calm, and they can actually know where the bullets are going to fly in a kind of psychic sense, and they can traverse, very dangerous territory without being injured. I wonder. People said that Hitler did a lot of these crazy, sort of brave sorts of maneuvers when he was in the Bavarian army, and I'm wondering if you have any insight into that, the psychic ability to. Because I think you do definitely.
Yeah, there's stories about, in particular, martial artists who they have this special strain, interestingly enough, of marijuana that they had down in where the Zulu are, and when they did analysis of it, they found that it was pure THC, which that's kind of common now. But when they did this analysis back in the 80s or something to find a pure THC, high THC plant was unheard of. There was always a mix of like CBDs and other things in there. And the Zulu would take this very high THC marijuana, and I want to say it was mixed with some other psychotropics, and they said, they couldn't be defeated in battle. And then they had a modern martial artist take this substance that the Zulus had created, and that modern martial artist claimed that he could see what his opponent was going to do before they did it. So I don't know if that answers your question, Philip, but kind of related. So Negus Afro Daendal.
We got love from Denmark. That's beautiful. Thank you.
And so then Sir Damien
love to you.
Oh yeah, love to you too, Negus. And so do you know if there's a connection between swarthy European nobility? Well, see, they're not called the black nobility because they're like, of African descent per se, although some of them might be North African descent from Carthage. They're called black nobility. They name themselves that because they're so frickin' evil and nasty. And it was sort of them, it was sort of like the 1400s version of getting a little tear tattoo next to your eye. They were trying to signal to everyone else that I'm a killer, I'm a G, I'm a gangster. You're going to mess with this? No, I didn't think so. It's just kind of like medieval version of flexing on people and saying like, who's going to stop us? They named themselves that. Has nothing to do with their pigmentation. Though, a lot of them are from Levantine or Arabian Peninsula bloodlines that go back to the ancient world, but they're not black like African black.
Some people, I've heard one explanation that many of them come from the Black Sea region. There's several explanations for this label.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Got some strange comments in here, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip past those. She was devil. Okay, this person's about to get kicked out, probably. The one that goes against God. Yeah, that's a good way of putting Moloch and whatever. Okay, well, this one person has decided to just be kind of like, I don't know, like kind of abusive. We'll see if they settle down a little bit. So KDP says, what if Hitler, Stalin, and all those were secret Moloch worshippers? Well, the thing is they could be either one or both. But as I said in the Shadow Wars, Luciferians versus Molochians, most people I don't think are like actively worshiping Lucifer or Moloch. I think that a lot of people are simply resonating at that frequency, so to speak, in their actions. I do think the people at the very top of the power pyramid are not only Moloch worshippers, but they do magical rites and connect with the god, commune with the god very directly. I mean, that's that whole Sola-Busca Tarochi thing I did earlier is pointing to that. But the average rank and file person, or even maybe a layer right below the tippy top, they may or may not be aware of it as being something that matters or is relevant or otherwise like is something that they engage with directly. Some of them do, of course, but many of them simply behave in that way. And in fact, let me show you this diagram that I had in the here in the that particular episode. Let's see here. This is quite tricky to get this sucker to work. Here we go. Let's see. So let me know if that comes up for you. That come up for you there? Yeah?
There we go. All right.
It's super like not big enough though. Let's see if I can make it bigger. Let's see if that works. Let's see. That's a little bit bigger. So, like people operate between these different energies all the time. And they move up and down. And I myself, I generally speaking, stick up here like in the top half of this Luciferian sphere and this Most High sphere. I do worship and directly commune with, work with the angels, the Most High. That is what my soul aspires to. But the reality is we're in Kali Yuga and the energy is very dense and thick. And it's quite often very difficult to stay up in this realm. And in fact, if you stay up here and act from that, you're likely to have a very rough go of it here in Kali Yuga. People are probably going to really take advantage of you. You might get hurt. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't strive for it. I'm just saying, like, such is the disgrace of a society that we're in currently, that if you are to live up in the sphere, you might find it very hard to, move in the world. Whereas this sphere is much more, sort of like, I mean, we're really stuck down here and we're moving upwards. I'm going to get rid of Katie's thing there, so that way it's not taking up the screen, because I just want to show this a little bit more. So yeah, this like sometimes when I get upset or I'm very competitive, I can spike downward into this this particular crossover area, to where I guess at times when I'm in a bad mood, someone cuts me off in traffic and the road rage hits, or I'm extremely competitive. So sometimes if I'm losing at something, I can have this like darker energy come out. I don't ever really go down here. And so my resting energy is kind of like in this space. And so Stalin, I would say, is very much, his resting place was just down here. And he might be lucky if he could get up to this upper thing. I mean, he definitely believed in conquest and desire for power, and he was ruthless, but he was very much a dead materialist, very much slavery, very much hive mind, very much material stagnation. I guess he did do some stuff to update their industrial stuff. But again, that's that Molochian use of technology simply to gain greater control and basically do more damage. So we're we're Stalin or Hitler worshiping these deities? Maybe, but probably not, would be my guess. Maybe Hitler was, because he was so surrounded by people who were into the esoteric and occult, but I really, really doubt that Stalin was. I could be wrong about that, and I'm open to information on it, but that would be my take on that. And so then let's see what other questions we got here. So KDP said she meant the higher ups. Yeah, I mean, like, right, but like I would argue that both Stalin and Hitler, I think they eventually came to run things, so to speak, but they were put there by the people that Philip and I point to, and were at least coached or funded or otherwise helped by these Venetian black nobilities. Yeah, we're going to keep this live for a little bit longer, Katie, and I mean this will be up later, and so you can listen to all of it again there. So let's see. Why would anyone worship Moloch? Seems like a bad deal anyway you slice it. Yeah, it's something that's confused me too in a certain sense. But I think that some people are so ruled by fear, they're so divorced from their own natural state, they're so traumatized that they think that that's just how the world is, and they want to get ahead. I mean, believe me, you won't catch me defending worship of Moloch. I don't get it. I don't understand that level of like psychopathy and desire to harm your fellow humans. But it's also impossible to deny that clearly it exists, and history is replete with it. So, yeah.
If it gives people that, if it gives power, and then if one experiences that sense of conquest over one's rivals, it's kind of like it would become addictive. If you were, especially if you're a fear-based person, it gave you that hit of triumph.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And yeah, I just think it's people who have an intense lust for power and are willing to do literally anything for it, and they don't see any reason to have anything other than slavery and total control of others. They want to be the slave master. So then Sir Damien writes, and perhaps this is a good question for you to answer, and then KDP has another question after this. If Kaiser Wilhelm II, is Kaiser Wilhelm's II's bloodline still around? I believe it is. I think that's Hohenhauser or whatever. I believe he was... Huh?
Yeah, it's the Hohenzollern family. They're very powerful, very active now.
Yeah, exactly. So to continue the question, then you can answer, Phil. I believe he was Prussian. One of his sisters became Queen of Greece, and another married a Russian noble. Please go ahead and answer. You were saying about House Hohenhauser?
Yeah, the Hohenzollern family still has dominion over most of Germany. Let's see, I believe he was Prussian, and his sisters became Queen of Greece. Yeah, somehow that I'm embarrassed to say I need to look into that. It's so complex. I can't, like, again, without trying to, like, make a disclaimer here, but no, this is fairly all new to me. I'm not an expert yet, but I will be an expert. And so I'm I,
But
I'm
the answer to
I
the first part of his question is yes, and then the rest of it seems like perhaps, Sir Damien, we salute
it
you because your
seems
knowledge exceeds
yeah,
our.
it seems right, and that sounds right to me, but I will check into it.
But certainly the Hohenhauser bloodline is still around. Very powerful, the house.
Oh
Can
yeah.
you
Oh
pronounce
yeah.
it? Sorry, I keep saying it wrong.
Hohenzollern.
Hohenzollern. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then, yeah, so the answer is yes, but neither Russia are familiar with his sister becoming a
That
queen of Greece.
sounds right. That sounds right to me. Yeah.
Sounds right to Philip. Yep.
Mm.
So tip of the hat to Sir Damien for coming up with a great question and knowing actually a little bit more than us about some of the bloodlines here. And that's part of the reason we want to do these shows is viewers can tell us stuff that's great. And so here is another question by KDP. She goes, and isn't it similar, if not the same, if you worship Luciferian? Okay, so let's talk about this. I actually do an entire show, which I really recommend, Katie, called Shadow Wars, Luciferians versus Molochians, where I deep dive in this question. But it's something that I want to hit because it's something that I think will, that we'll continue to be exploring on this channel. And so I'm going to real quick, I just have to get this up again here. So if you look at this again, and then let's see how it looks on the screen. So if you look at this again, and actually I need to take your comment off just to make it easier to see. But if you look on the screen here, I don't know, can you see my mouse, by the way, Philip? Can you see this mouse here moving?
I can't.
You can't. Okay. Well, if you look at the bottom sphere, that's Molochianism. And you'll see that there's crossover like a Venn diagram. And you'll see that the Molochians believe in things like the hive mind, dead materialism, slavery, Epstein-style harm of children, which the Luciferians do not. That's one of the big differences. Chaotic duality, so that means real division, right? Democrats versus Republicans, left versus right, men against women, gay versus straight, whatever, black versus white, all the different ways that they split humanity. Chaotic duality, creating these false dualities that aren't truly there, that cause us to fight each other. And that is, just real quick, that is the opposite of that is harmonious duality. So the inner working between divine masculine and divine feminine, for instance, or racial harmony would be under that, for example. Then you see parasitism, physical torture, might makes right. That's a big difference between the Luciferians and the Molochians. Material stagnation for humanity. So then you look up here and you'll see where they are similar is they both believe in conquest. So you might say, well, how is that might makes right? Well, this is like the conquest here is based on to a certain extent, it's a fitness thing. It's a Darwinian, like social Darwinism kind of attitude, as opposed to I'm just going to punch a baby because I'm a full-grown man. That's might makes right. Conquest here means like I go to an arm wrestling match and I arm wrestle against full-grown men and I beat them because I'm better. I'm stronger. The Luciferians love that kind of fitness, meritocracy kind of stuff. And so desire for power, ruthless hierarchy, conquest, competition, that's where there's a lot of crossover between them. The Molochians only like competition in a very narrow band. They don't like competition that leads to social movement or power changing hands. That they hate. But they love to see like two people fighting in a gladiator pit to the death. That
Interesting.
So
interesting.
With the Luciferians, they believe in meritocracy, whereas the Molochians believe more in just handing power to those who are loyal above all else. Loyalty is what matters to them. Luciferians prize loyalty as well, but for different reasons. Molochians require this nepotism, transferring bloodlines and so forth, whereas Luciferians are like, bring in the new blood, bring in whoever's the best at this job. We want the best of the best. They believe in meritocracy. They believe in the rule of law over man. Rule of law and honoring contracts, very different from the Molochians who believe in, oh, there was a contract. Oh, it's illegal for my group to keep classified documents at home. That's okay.
Uh,
Although that one may change because that may be how they're about to get rid of Biden. So hold that example lightly, but just think of any incredible hypocrisy you've seen the last few years. Any incredible hypocrisy to where what it comes down to is that they just don't care about the law and they're flaunting their lawlessness, right? There's been
yeah,
tons of the past
there's a
6 or
kind
7
of flexing. There's a kind of sense of flexing, like I don't have to follow the law. You can
right.
investigate me. You can basically prove that I'm guilty, but look, nothing will happen to me.
Yep.
Uh,
Might makes right. Might makes
right.
right. Whereas Syrians believe in contracts. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm finished. Yeah, it's one C. I think it's a kind of that sort of triumphing over the sense of that they can triumph over natural law by getting away with things and doing it with impunity in full view of everyone, and everyone is powerless to stop them. I also think there could be sort of a program of demoralization. You know, for instance, after the last election, we saw this evidence of election fraud, which has been going on since the beginning of the republic. There's nothing new or controversial about that. But then how we had to sort of stand by helplessly as the courts refused to review the evidence. And this has nothing to do with politics. It's not about taking political sides. It's about observing a very interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so the Luciferians believe in honoring contracts and the rule of law over man. So it is a higher ideal. And you see this a lot in the Constitution, which is very Luciferian, actually. It's very Luciferian at its core, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Especially those two in combination really show you the Constitution wants to keep that meritocracy in place. It wants to, have that hierarchy in place. But the Bill of Rights is much more like honoring contracts, rule of law over man. You can have enlightened self-interest. There's cooperation. We're, allowing people to worship as they wish, liberty and free will. You see that kind of stuff embedded into the Constitution and Bill of Rights. And so the Luciferians are utterly ruthless, though, and they will totally use violence. They don't mind that. And that's where there's some crossover between the two. The difference is that the Luciferians want to improve the material well-being of humanity. They want to spiritualize humanity. They want cooperation. They basically want to perfect humanity, which keeps it's basically they're humanists. They want to put the perfected human at the center, and then by extension, and perhaps also they will say, we freed you from the Molochians. They want to put worship of Lucifer and worship of the human ego at the center. And that's the false light that draws you away from the Most High. That's where this false light energy comes in. But it's a false light. It's not darkness, which is Moloch, but it's also not the light of the Most High. It's a false light. Because it puts human ego at the center rather than God at the center. Whereas the Most High attitude would be, I am God, you are God, Philip. These bookcases behind me are God. That globe behind me is God. It really is God too. And it's I'm just going to go ahead and make the flat earthers mad because, oops, sorry, I keep going the wrong way because it's reversed. Whoop, there it is, a globe. Yeah, see, because that's vaguely what the earth looks like, flat earthers. It's vaguely what it looks like. I know you hate it. Enjoy that globe. I get so many comments about the globe behind me. So anyways, so the Most High says that everything is God, and that if everything is God, it's that central thing that Yeshua or Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. Not love thy neighbor because, hey, it's Ned Flanders, he's a friendly guy. Love that neighbor because that neighbor's you, and you are that neighbor. And if we all understood that very deeply, we wouldn't be hurting each other. We wouldn't even be competing with each other. We wouldn't need contracts because we'd have total trust. We wouldn't need a lot of these structures. But right now, we need structures because people are just not nearly, mature enough on a spiritual level in order to really operate in this highest sphere. So I would be thrilled if we can move out of this Molochian sphere and leave the hive mind, the dead materialism, the slavery, especially the Epstein-style harm of children, The physical torture might makes right, material stagnation for humanity. By the way, I'm not 100% on this physical torture because it does seem that perhaps the Luciferians would be open to that because they are ruthless. And the nice thing is when the Molochians are finally smashed here in the next few years, if it was a bunch of people like Jesus running things, they might say, turn the other cheek with the Molochians. We shouldn't do any. No, the Luciferians will say, we're hanging them all. We're stringing them up. We're wiping them out. We're taking over. We don't want any threat to our power around. And these guys have done something we find to be particularly despicable. They really, really, really don't like the harm of children thing. They think it's abhorrent and disgusting, which most of humanity does. They're hardly unique in that way. But so that's kind of like telling it all. And so that's the kind of the difference between the Luciferians and Molochians. Real quick, Arya Ravenswood gave us a nice little super chat here. She might have left. You are so welcome, Arya. I hope you watch this after the fact. Really appreciate that super chat. Very generous of you and kind. And then KDP says they're equally bad. And doesn't the Bible call Lucifer the Satan? No, it does mention Lucifer, and it mentions Lucifer in kind of negative terms, which makes sense because Lucifer was both competition for Yahweh Jehovah, which is not the Most High. That's a usurper war god, probably an aspect of Mars. Nothing to do with the Most High, actually, just stole that angelic portfolio. And also keep in mind that the Bible, the original text of the Bible may very well be a pure transmission from the disciples or Jesus, right? But the Bible, as we know it in modern times, is very carefully crafted by the Council of Nicaea and other councils where they plucked out a lot of the books of the Bible and edited it down to take out anything that would allow you to have a direct connection with God. And instead that you had to have a central authority, you had to have a church, you yourself can't achieve this. They also decided they deified Jesus and said he was a god rather than a messenger who was telling us how to be in the world, which Jesus said constantly, that I'm an example, do as I do. He didn't, like the stuff about the Jesus saying I am God, I think is a misquote and out of text. I mean, this is super contentious stuff and not everyone's going to agree, but Lucifer is not the same as Satan. I just want to, to me, that's absolutely, it is not the same at all. All right, so let's see here. Last question is Sir Damien. Were the Templars influenced by Moors and or Sufis? That is a great question, Sir Damien. And what I would recommend is that you get this book. Let me see if I can find it. Oh, darn it. I don't have it on hand. But it's The Way of the Modern Templar by Timothy Hogan, who I've had on the show before, Grandmaster Timothy Hogan. And the short answer to your question is yes, because the original First Templar Grandmaster, Hugh de Paynes, he had a heraldic symbol that had 3 Moorish heads that they sold as he was fighting the Muslim Moors. That's how they explained it to people. But the reality is he was probably a quarter Moorish himself. And the Sufis are considered brothers by the Templar. They're considered to be a brotherly organization, like the Druze in Jerusalem, Lebanon, Levant area. The Druze is a very small sect of people. So they're seen as like a organization that's friendly and has many of the same values and many of the same spiritual truths, or what Tim Hogan would call the primordial tradition, which I believe, and Tim more or less agreed to this one in our interviews, the primordial tradition is basically Atlantean, I think it's Atlantean Most High worship, elements of that, and possibly some of the Atlantean, late Atlantean and post-Atlantean Luciferian understanding of how certain things work. Basically, it's just ancient esoteric knowledge. That's kind of the umbrella term is the primordial tradition. Don't quote me on that last part where I said that it's Most High / Luciferian. Tim Hogan may or may not agree with that. He just calls this corpus of work, which is very extensive and includes things like the Hermetica, the Zohar, things like this, primordial tradition. So then someone asks, Putin is Molochian. Nope. Putin is about the most Luciferian guy walking on the face of the earth. Couldn't get much more Luciferian than Putin. Super smart, super shifty, super crafty, four-dimensional chess, utterly ruthless, believes in meritocracy, wants to honor contracts. He often talks about, and his administration talks about, how the West is, quote, not agreement capable.
Right.
Just shot across the bow of Molochianism, which believes in might makes right, kind of like, I don't know, rolling NATO up into a country and setting up shop. Even when you promised, H.W. Bush promised not to move NATO eastward, that we've done nothing but move it eastward. There's some apologists out there say it's not the case, but he's definitely not Molochian in my book at all.
Yeah, I agree.
So let's see. P. Scott says, what was the Luciferian involvement in the Needlecraft campaign? Is it a trap for the Molochians? Now, that is a great question, P. Scott. I am not familiar with the Needlecraft campaign. Can you give me some more information about that? That's something I can look at in more detail, but I don't have enough information to ask that. And I always try to answer that. I always try to just be honest and say I don't have an answer for that when I don't have knowledge of it. But if you give me more information, we can look into that at some point. So Luciferians are New Age-like philosophy. Yeah, there's a lot of crossover between the two. And I would say that New Ageism is actually a Luciferian current that will eventually resolve in that it will come to want people to openly worship Lucifer. I do think that's true. It's certainly a made out of whole cloth thing that has connections to intelligence agencies. For example, Course in Miracles can be linked back to, I want to say, the CIA. Don't quote me on that, but some intelligence agency.
Yeah, I think so. I've heard that too. Yeah.
Okay. So then KDP goes on to say, to get behind putting ego at the center has never served me in any good. Yeah. So like the principle, like the law of attraction, the way they apply it, it's very much pumping up your ego. It's very much about self-service, right? And there is a narcissistic quality. There's a self-hatred quality to Molochians, I would say, and a narcissistic quality to Luciferians. And then I would say that there is a self-love, full acceptance of self and full self-actualization by people who worship the Most High. That's the general movement. So how would we love the neighborhood if ego's at the center? Perhaps, but the gist is the same. Do you think it's okay to challenge God? I mean, I think everyone has the right to behave however they want, as long as they're not harming others. I think people can certainly say whatever they want. And so if someone wants to challenge God, I guess that's up to them. But, God's 10 trillion and undefeated. The thing is, you might say, well, but how are the evil doers doing so well right now? Well, the Most High and so first of all, there's a supreme being which extends beyond Earth. The Most High and Moloch are earthbound deities. Lucifer is not earthbound, but he's very interested in the fate of the earth. But Big G, God, the supreme being, is not. It's all of these things and none of them. It's something like greater than that. So you can't really. That particular God's undefeated, but that God allows for natural law, and natural law has cycles where you have things like, Kali Yuga, evil, and inversions of natural law are allowed. Weirdly, pushing back against natural law is allowed during a Kali Yuga, but certain aspects of natural law are going to kick back in here shortly as we move into the Dwapara Yuga. One of them is that children are off limits for harm. So there are cycles in which certain behavior is allowed, and then later it's not, and just it won't happen. And we're moving towards an era. It may take time, but sometime in the next 300 years, it could be as soon as 5 years. It may be as long as a couple decades, or hopefully not 300 years, but no longer than 300 years, pedophilia will be wiped from the earth. But I think it'll be much sooner than that. I think it'll be completely underground and 10 times more hidden than it's ever been within a few years. And the reason for that is those people will be being hunted down by the Luciferians. And therefore, it'll be in their best interest to hide that to the maximum. How long it continues to go on before it's completely gone, I don't know. But by and large, it'll be wiped out in the next decade. Needlecraft is to evade the AI. Not sure. It refers to a certain mandated. Oh, I got it. Needlecraft. Okay. So this person, P. Scott, please interject if this is incorrect. So was the Luciferian involvement in the needlecraft campaign, right? The medical emergency, is it a trap from the Molochians? Yes. Yes. And it goes deeper than that. The Luciferian, the Molochians, Luciferians, and even the Most High, they all agree that this period of time, it's fated and destined that many humans will die, will not. They'll leave the planet or reincarnate or whatever, right? Their flesh suit is going to die. That's always happens at the end of Kali Yuga, apparently. There's always a big bottleneck effect, a big population drop off. The Luciferians, because they're very social Darwinist and meritocratic, they wanted to do the needlecraft campaign, as you call it, great way of talking about things. They wanted to do that to implement true eugenics and dysgenics, to where they would get rid of the dysgenic, right? They'd get rid of the dead weight, in their opinion, and they would let the people who were more talented and so forth survive. The Molochians wanted population reduction, period. They want way, 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 way less of us, so that way it's easier to control. The Luciferians tried to intervene to some degree, hence they, it seems, tricked the Molochians into making saline batches to reduce people's suspicions, but actually the Luciferians wanted that out there to reduce the harm. You see, the difference is the Molochians are willing to burn the house down rather than let a new person come in. The Molochians will burn the world to a cinder and wipe us all out. Moloch, the deity, would do that like that. It's total submission or total annihilation. There is no in between. And so Moloch, rather than let go of control, would just wipe us all out. But the Luciferians, they want to take over. They want to take over the global civilization and guide it in the direction they want. So the Molochians are like, we're either going to do the Great Reset or we're going to kill a ton of people. So we're going to kill a ton of people as part of the Great Reset, depopulation, and then we'll be able to control people forever. And if we feel like we're threatened, we might try and do something to where we just kill everyone. By the way, they'll be stopped. So don't worry about that. That I'm just explaining the thinking of these people. The Luciferians, on the other hand, they want to do this takeover as carefully as possible to keep high technology, a global civilization, and a robust population, especially the people that they feel are more talented, eugenics kind of attitude, like the best breeding stock. They would like to keep the best of humanity around and a high enough population to keep global civilization going. That's their goal. And they don't want to have a bunch of chaos and fallout and people freaking out and burning cities to the ground. And that's part of why they're doing things kind of like very slowly, applying more and more pressure on these weak spots in order to take over without the Molochians getting spooked and causing way more damage in the meantime. So they have to simultaneously lay the groundwork to defeat the Molochians in the public mind and destroy their narrative, but also not scare the Molochians into realizing that they're going to lose power into where they do something crazy. They want to slowly take over, and they want to get like compromising information on people, knock on their door, say, look at this portfolio, we own you, now stay in your job, do the things you would normally do. But when we give you a call and say you need to make this statement or do this policy, you do it. And they're doing that. And they're also getting pressure from people to get blackmail information on people further out. They're basically catching people and showing them, look, we got you on Epstein's Island. We got the video. Look, we have this bank account transfer that's totally criminal. We have it. We have this, we have this, we have that. We have it all. The infamous "we have it all" letter that was at the W. Bush or H.W. Bush funeral. The whole letter that said "we have it all," supposedly. I think that's true, actually. I think some of the faint outlines of the 17th letter of the alphabet, something about that was true, even though the thing as overarching was false. It was like a shadow of what was really happening to some degree. All right, so yes, it's one of the Achilles heels of the Molochians. To answer that question. All right, let's see here. To get behind, putting you at center. Do you think it's okay to challenge a needlecraft, evade the AI? Yep, that's great. Perfect. So that was what it was. By the way, the needlecraft, he was being. Thank you, P. Scott. That was an excellent way of putting it in. And thank you, Shan Jack, for explaining that. Okay, so KDP asks again, why is Lucifer taking or has ambitions towards something that's not his, like the earth? Well, but it is his. During the Bronze and Silver Ages, it's his playground. That's just how it works according to natural law. Christians don't like this because they want to go straight to the part where, like, Jesus comes down, we have a golden age. There's a process involved there, and I don't think that you can take the book of Revelations as exactly how things are going to go down, even though I do think the book of Revelations is going to have a lot of stuff that's true. So Lucifer, I will tell you, is a super hyper political being. Lucifer is an off-planet deity. There's other planets, like Lucifer has influence on other planets, perhaps with a different name or whatever, but same basic energy. And Lucifer is very political and would like humans to get off planet and involved in the exopolitics in our galaxy. The reason he's interested in humans, and the reason, even though we're way out on a spiral arm, I guess there's two things I've been told by the angels, for what it's worth, take it with a grain of salt. The two reasons that the Earth is particularly important is because A, our location on the outer arm of a spiral galaxy puts us in some kind of transportation line to where near us, right, but in galactic terms, so I don't know how close to us, somewhere near us there's some kind of intergalactic exchange. So we're important in the sense that we're kind of like a highway exit ramp, almost, if you will, like on an intergalactic highway, something like that. There's something strategically important to where we operate in space, apparently. The second reason Lucifer is very interested in us is because supposedly there's many species that are much, much smarter than us. There's many, many, many species who are way more technologically advanced than us. There's many species that are vastly larger than us. There's many species that are nearly immortal or have just tremendous physical robustness. But humans apparently are among the very most spiritually potent beings in the entire galaxy. Something about us is incredibly spiritually potent, and our ability to like influence reality on a spiritual level is almost second to none. And so Lucifer wants to bring us into his stable to make use of us in his grander galactic scheme. I mean, he wants to have a Luciferian empire throughout this galaxy. For what it's worth, no way of proving anything I'm saying. I'm just sharing with you what the spirits have told me. All right, let's get here. Elon Musk. So Lux Eterna says, Elon Musk mentions we are passing through the great filter on his Twitter over a year ago. Do you know what that means? I know what it means, so I'm just curious if you want to answer this one, if you know what it means.
No idea.
Okay, so the great filter is this concept of why do we not see any aliens? The reason we don't see any aliens is because there's a great filter to where civilizations, before they can be interstellar, they always get wiped out by something. And so Lux Eterna seems to be pointing to this idea of that we are right now on the cusp of either we're going to run up against that great filter and get killed, or we're going to pass through it and get off the planet. And spoiler alert, it's the second. We're going to pass it and get off the planet. How long it takes, I don't know, but I suspect that within 50 years we will be off the planet, if not much, much, much sooner. The technology already exists. The question is when will it be released publicly? 5.5, 5 of 5, not sure what that means. Maybe that's a rating, 5 out of 5 stars. We'll take it, thank you. So who created the earth? Maybe because we were created in the image of God. So again, you're asking like really deep theological questions that I can just share an opinion about. I'm not the sole arbiter of truth on this, and neither is Philip. I mean, you're asking some of the most fundamental questions of reality right here that smarter men and women than I have discussed this stuff for centuries. In my opinion, the Supreme Being did. The Supreme Being is everything and nothing. It's beyond description. It's not the Most High, and whatever the Supreme Being is, it put Earth with seasons and cycles and yugas, and it said that the three major deities that have the most domination on the planet during those yugas are Moloch, Lucifer, and the Most High. Other deities which, by the way, are acknowledged in the Bible, other deities can have tremendous influence within that, but always one of those three is the dominating evolutionary track of its particular stretch of time. So that would be my answer to that. Let's see. What does P. Scott say here? This is a perfect one for you. What do you think, Philip? And what are your opinions on that?
I think
Scott says, will we see an end to a maritime admiralty law? Go ahead. Sorry, Philip. I should have read it.
Yeah, I think we have to transform inside ourselves to rejuvenate our relationship to many things: art, culture, laws included, science, and that has to happen first. But I think, yes, I think all the present systems of law, in my view, are going to sort of fall away as we regenerate something from a better place, you know.
And I mean,
I guess, you know, back to the question about who created the world. I mean, to me, this is all very interesting because actually, I don't know if it's I don't know what it is, but I can't relate to any kind of deity or entity or anything. Like, to me, all of this is so strange, which is, I think, one reason I think creates dynamism for me on Ian's show, because I'm open to it, I'm learning about it, but I can't personally relate to any of it. I don't understand worship. I don't understand entities. I don't understand deities. It's like a strange language to me. It has no reality. I go into myself and I work with my own consciousness, and I don't know any more than that. I think when we say who created, maybe it's not a who. Maybe when we say create, we're talking about something that's not the same as the fundamental or original creation, if it even happened. I tend to think that there is only consciousness, and that consciousness can probably relates to itself and generates forms, and we are that, and we are all of that. We are infinite. Our consciousness is ageless and infinite in time and space. And I think as we take the time to explore, which is really great fun to explore your own consciousness, in that sense, we get in contact with our potential to create better forms of law. Back to the admiralty law question. When we learn to reason, when we are more attuned to what is a best outcome scenarios, how do we restore balance in chaotic situations? How do we what is our view of fairness? These are very deep questions, but we refine them. We're always fine-tuning. And when we do that within ourselves and we take full responsibility for that, then we can begin to generate the new forms of law and of everything else, culture, science, everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really great answer. So I'm going to answer a quick question, then a longer one. So quick question is, are you afraid of Amorc? No, I'm not a member of the American organization Rosicrucians, or I forget what Amorc stands for. It's a Rosicrucian organization. I have a number of friends who have been parts of Amorc, and some people who speak really highly, especially of old school Amorc. I guess there was some kind of leadership struggle in the 90s, early 2000s, and some people feel that things have taken a worse hit. Also, it had a 111-year contract, which I think maybe runs out this year, because I want to say it started in 1912. And so they will presumably start something like Amorc again. And Amorc seems to be an emanation of these deeper hidden mystery schools. So no, I'm not afraid of the Amorc, but I am familiar with Amorc to some degree. and I'm friends with a lot of people who have completed those courses. There's a very interesting interview or discussion about AMORC and that power struggle I just talked about on Forum Borealis, which is a channel I would recommend to any of my viewers. It was kind of what, in many ways, inspired and led to this channel. So let's see here. The longer question is also by Lux Eterna, and Lux Eterna writes, what is your opinions on the Luciferians and Molochians in Hollywood where they differ? Well, I mean, they're all going to differ in the exact same ways of, that I've described previously. They have some overlap, right? With this ruthless competition, belief in hierarchy. But, one allows for the Epstein-style harm of children. By the way, we're going to need to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes or less, because I have something at 5 p.m. that I must do, and I need at least small break between. And so I would say that, like someone who you might say is Luciferian, it seems, is James Wood, who, unfortunately, I was raised Democratic. I voted Democratic for forever and ever. I consider myself lefty for a long ass time. My principles haven't changed one iota. The Overton window went flying by me like a Lamborghini Countach with a blower and a nitrous burst. And the next thing I knew, suddenly I'm a far right Nazi for thinking that people shouldn't be forced to take a you-know-what in the arm, or having questions about whether burning down my federal courthouse in Portland was was free speech. And so,
oh my God! It's like if Martin Luther King were alive today, he'd be called a white supremacist.
Absolutely, thank you, 100%, totally agree. So, unfortunately, the unfortunate reality is that the DNC and Democratic Party seem to be rotten with Molochians. I think there are good people in the Democratic Party. Certainly, there are regular people like us who are totally good people who are still Democrats out of loyalty or conditioning, or they've been in a coma the past 5-6 years, and they just woke up out of the coma and they're still registered Democrat. It seems hard to me to believe that a lot of people are experiencing overwhelming cognitive dissonance and extreme pain as they realize that their good nature has been played upon to push all these Trojan horses. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I'm building up to a point. It seems that the Republican members of Hollywood, or really the country, are kind of Luciferian, and that the Democrats are kind of Molochian at this point. I would have said the opposite was true 20 years ago, that there was more Luciferian types in the Democratic Party, and that there was more Molochian warmongers. Let's get the Patriot Act put in, all this kind of stuff under the Bush era Republicans. And so I would say the dominant current in the Democratic Party right now is Molochianism, and the dominant current in the Republican Party right now is Luciferianism, which is hilarious since the Republican Party is filled with Christians who will get triggered by me saying that. But, that's just my observation on things. I would say there's a lot of people in both parties, regular people like myself on the ground, that are in alignment with the Most High and those kind of principles. But the political organizations we're looking at, there's really no question that the Republican Party moves between this Molochian and Luciferian energy, and right now the Democrats move between Molochian energy and extra Molochian energy, as far as I can tell, and then maybe an extra additional dose of Molochianism on top of that. And so James Woods, you might consider to be Luciferian, and maybe Clint Eastwood would be Luciferian, because these people believe in meritocracy and contracts and rule of law, which puts them in the Luciferian camp. That would be my answer to those. It's a bit tricky. I would say as a construct, Hollywood's very Molochian, and perhaps pretty much always has been, with some Luciferian stuff bursting through here and there. Lord of the Rings is kind of like it's definitely not Molochian. It's talking about fighting a Moloch-like force. So, I mean, there's been good stuff that's come out of Hollywood, but as an entity, certainly Hollywood in 2023, Molochian, almost from top to bottom. Doesn't mean everybody in Hollywood is that. It just means that that's the energy and vibe of the major studios down there. Okay.
Yeah,
Let's see.
I was just, if I could just interject something quickly. I think there's a
Yeah.
lot of such beautiful, amazing artistry and very great stuff. A lot of it coming out of Hollywood. I would think that to the extent to which a piece of art is effective, that's Luciferian. These beautiful artistic principles
Yeah.
that when they're
Yes.
fulfilled, it's incredible. But I think I could be wrong about this, but the Malachian side is when that's used to brainwash people or lead them to ideas or behavior that goes against their own best interests in the interest of a controlling elite. You know, Hollywood was immediately seized upon by the CIA and organized crime, and some of these black nobility families have huge influence in Hollywood. For that
Yes.
reason, you can brainwash people and lead them to believe things that don't necessarily serve them. That's the Malachian side, in my view, and it becomes, to the extent that it becomes a center of power for this reason, you have the deepening of these horrific sort of undercurrents in Hollywood that we're all aware of. So
Absolutely. So just some comments. Alexa Turner said, yeah, the extremes have become even more extremes.
I agree with that. Yep.
I agree. The New Age crowd is clueless. They are worshiping Lucifer and they don't even know. Yeah, I mean it's a false light. So Malachians are your blue checkmark dead materialist atheist type,
Yeah.
and that's got all sorts of problems because dead materialism makes it very easy to manipulate you through fear because you believe no one's judging you, so you can do whatever you want, and you also believe that it's one and done. That like there's just this life and then you die. There's no consequences for your actions. So if you can get away with it, go ahead and do it. So dead materialism is like in my opinion, is the single most pernicious, evil, nasty, horrible ideology that's ever existed because communism isn't possible without it. Most of like the great evils of almost all time aren't really if you believe in karma and you believe you're going to reincarnate, you have a lot harder time of doing acts of pure evil than if you are a dead materialist. And so while I'm not a fan of New Age, although I suppose at one point in time I was sucked into that movement to some degree, I'm not a fan of New Age. It is a spiritual belief system. It believes that there's something more than dead materialism, but it's a false light. So it puts it very squarely in that camp of Lucifer. So we are going to wrap up. I'm just going to get a couple last questions here. Katie said about my answer to her question where I did with the angels. She said, I listened. You were pretty on point. Thank you.
Wow.
So there's a chance. I just have to be okay by myself. Yeah, exactly. I can't say, one thing that happens sometimes is as we do our own inner work, we no longer vibrate at a level that is compatible with someone who isn't doing their work. And so what I would say then, Katie, is that if I believe the man's name was Jordan, my apologies if I'm wrong about that. If this man comes back into your life after you've done that work, then you can know you're a match and maybe you had to catch up to something to him. But if he doesn't come back in, it's because you've now leveled up and you're going to attract a partner who's much, much better than that. I this summer met and fell in love with someone and it didn't work out, and then have since met someone else that is vastly better. So if it doesn't work out with this guy, there's something better out there. And the more you do your internal work, the more you're going to attract that to you, which I can testify is exactly what happens for me and has happened throughout my life when I go back and look at it. All right, so a couple last few questions here. Thomas Anderson writes, it is said Moloch can be seen as equivalent to Kronos. I would say he's the lower aspect of Kronos, or lower aspect of Saturn, which Kronos focuses quite a lot on the lower aspect of Saturn. So the Greeks called the Moloch worshippers. They called that being Kronos for sure. And so how would you distinguish Kronos from Lucifer? Well, it's the same thing as I've been talking about throughout. And I mean, you should watch that Shadow Wars Luciferians versus Molochians, where I go into a lot more depth. And I'm not going to reiterate stuff I've already gone over in this program and in that show, but please do go and watch that Shadow Wars Luciferians versus Molochians. And I'm going to go into that more. And every time I do that show, I'm going to tease out more and more of these differences between Lucifer and Moloch. They're not the same being. It's completely different. Okay. And if we can extend to Moloch, Cronus, Saturns, what would be the implications for the Romans? Well, I mean, it's the Saturnalia and this there was like a lot of Saturn worship, even if I recall correctly, and I might not. I want to say that Rome is built around a temple to Saturn that was there before the Republic even started. I might be wrong about that, but I think that you can say that in many ways Rome was Molochian, but it did have some Luciferian impulse. It did have some Luciferian aspects to it. For instance,
would that might have been the light from the Greeks that they borrowed from?
Yeah, I mean, a better way of putting it is I would say the Republic of Rome was Luciferian with Molochian highlights, and I would say that Imperial Rome was Molochian with some elements of Luciferianism that still kept over, but a lot of it's just like where Luciferians like Archimedes of Syracuse came up with these incredible advancements in technology, and the Molochian Romans, as Molochians like to do, they grabbed that technology and they repurposed it for control, slavery, domination. Whereas Archimedes was creating this technology to either uplift humanity or to defend Syracuse. Just one example. Cover any of these questions, just dropped in 10 minutes ago. Yeah, we did. P. Scott says, great stuff, lads. Fascinating as always.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Good sir, if I could. I really want to get to Ireland and Dublin and have a fresh from the brewery. I can't think of what it's called.
Guinness?
Using beer. Guinness, thank you. Yes, of course. Super embarrassing.
Yeah, thank you. This was great to have you.
Okay, last question, then we're going to wrap it up here. What distinguishes Molochian and Luciferian music and perhaps relation to instruments? Well, I would say that the Molochians, I think, did the whole changing of the key of A away from the solfeggio frequencies to whatever it is now, and I don't remember that. I believe that, there's tons of like in-your-face Molochian stuff like that gay black man whose name is escaping me, Little something or other, Lil Nas, maybe I think his name is. He'd like put drops of human blood in his shoes and like literally is like doing a lap dance for the devil. I mean, that's in your face Molochianism. And there's lots of it. Luciferianism, you're probably not going to see from the big studios as much. I think Tool, the band Tool, is very Luciferian. Very occult and esoteric. A lot of their songs with like Golden Mean Spiral stuff in it and all kinds of stuff. So those are just a couple of examples. Certainly like Mozart, actually I would say was Most High music that he was channeling. Beethoven, I think, is Luciferian or Most High trending. And I think a lot of the classical music that really uplifts the spirit is at a minimum Luciferian and can even spike into those Most High realms. And indeed, the old cathedrals were made with sacred geometry to vibrate in a certain way and to carry sound in a certain way to uplift and spiritualize humanity. So you can say those ancient cathedrals, ironically, Luciferian. Perhaps might have a bit of Most High. A lot of the people who were building it probably were moved in that direction, but the Most High is the least dominant force right now. It's going to gain a lot of cachet and a lot of power in just a few short years here. It's going to really burst onto the scene. And unlike the Molochians, the Luciferians will tolerate it. And in fact, they'll point to that toleration of why they're better and they should be worshipped. They won't have any delusions, most likely, about converting Most High folks to them, but there's an awful lot of agnostics and atheists and people who are worshiping whatever kind of thing that will be attracted to Luciferianism as it comes more to the fore. Oh, so Rick just came in here at the end, and this is literally the last question. We won't be doing anymore. What's the Molochians' obsession with child harm? So I'll answer this with a story. In 2004, I was initiated by a man who was a Siberian shaman. He was literally from a Kamchatka, I think it is, tribe, way northeastern Russia on the Pacific Rim, where they build totem poles and so forth. He was half Siberian and half Inuit, and he was actually albino and like 6'4". This incredible man. And he initiated me, and he told me that the primary thing that white magicians or shamans or light workers needed to do was to end this Epstein-style harm of children, because it anchored in our reality the lowest aspect of the lower astral realm. So he didn't use the word Moloch, I am, but he told me that it was the number one thing. And he said a few thousand years ago, basically at the dawn of the descending Kali Yuga, that there were dark magicians. I'm paraphrasing heavily here, but this is basically what he told me, and then some other stuff as well filled this in over time. But he basically said the dawn of Kali Yuga, there were black magicians. They already worked with demons. They were told by those demons there's a greater power that you could tap into that's even more powerful than the demons you've been working with. The black magician said, okay, tell us more about this. And they said, well, the only way you can open a portal to commune with this deity and bring that energy into this world is through the Epstein-style harm of children. Hence, Moloch worship and that rolling out. It was done specifically to open a portal to the lower astral realm, to the pit where Moloch resides, so Moloch could touch the world to some degree. That's why they're obsessed in it. They have to maintain that. They literally have to do it. And it's one of the big hallmarks of the Molochians is this child harm thing. It's a requirement. The Luciferians find it repugnant. They don't like it. They also recognize it as empowering Moloch rather than Lucifer. And so they're against it for that reason, rather than, I mean, it depends on the Luciferian in particular, but they're against it for that reason and other reasons. They just find it repugnant. They find it there's a very aristocratic, genteel feel to that current of a very highly polished, very professional, very cultured person is a Luciferian. Very meritocratic, graduating top of their class at whatever Ivy League school kind of energy, right? So hierarchy and meritocracy, but still that hierarchy and superiority. And so they're very they see it as very crass and very beneath humanity, and there's no juice there for the development of humanity. In fact, it actively damages humanity. It damages future generations of humanity, and it keeps humanity at a lower state of consciousness, which they don't want. They want people in that middle range of consciousness, which, again, I would recommend to you, Rick. I think you've already watched it because I'm pretty sure you commented on there about finance. And I answered you, by the way, with full respect for you. I just shared my opinion about economic stuff. But anyways, I go into that to some degree in that video, but I think you've already seen it. I'm going to go into more depth on all of this stuff in the future. So never thought I'd side with the Luciferians. Dude, brother, believe me, I understand. And believe me, I agree with you. And for me, the way I look at it is, if you have a truly vile, evil, despotic government, and then a pretty tricky and ruthless other potential government comes along and says, hey, we want to do a coup against this government that's enslaving and torturing and harming children, but we still do war and hierarchy and stuff, I'm probably going to be more okay with that group that doesn't try and round me up and take me to a camp and won't let me have freedom of speech or freedom of ideas or whatever. Lucifer's very misunderstood, I would say. And this is because the Vatican, which is a Molochian institution, very intentionally demonized Lucifer. This isn't to say Lucifer doesn't have negative traits. That's why I go into all that. Complicated. It's complex. It's not dualistic. And we have to think in a more mature, adult manner rather than expecting things to be one way or the other. And so anyways, I've gone way over time here, and I really have to wrap up here. But thank you so much, everyone, for the first ever live chat for White Lotus Light. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if you want to add anything,
Thank you, Ian. I learned so much, as always, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, brother. And thanks to everybody who commented. Rick Fool, Similar Prisoners, Kingmaker, that's a great thing. I'll just put up vibration equals emotion. The better the feeling, the higher vibration. I would say that's largely true.
Oh, yeah.
P. Scott in Ireland, Thomas Anderson, KDP, Lux Eterna, James and Johnio. This is a great one for your service piece. Profound, my brother. Thank you so much. Beautiful comment. Sorry I missed that earlier. Lux Eterna. I think I've hit everyone. I really need to get going. Shanjack. And then there was some people earlier, NASDAQ. Aria Ravenswood was on a lot earlier. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you next time. And thanks again. And we'll be doing these live chats probably once a month. I'm thinking if me and Philip can get on the same page about that. So yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you next time. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
If you haven't already, hit like and subscribe, and be sure to share this.
Of course. Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.